Hey guys, Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Do Not Enter. Now, this is from what I can tell at least, a lower budget movie that I did not see any, trailers for. I just happened to come across it. But in this regard, I always do love reviewing movies on the lower end of the spectrum to give them a little bit of a spotlight, perhaps. After all, these are the types of movies that can often get ignored even by other YouTube reviewers and so on and so forth. So that is where I come in. Hopefully. So, with that being said, I will still treat it like any other review. I will be reviewing it as objectively as possible. So the movie starts off with some woman crawling around and getting caught off by something. We don't know what that something is, but we cut away to a streamer group of the aforementioned characters. We have Rick, the boyfriend, Diane, the lead character, Vern, the camera guy, and Cora, the runner, I guess I would call her. So they plan to jump off a train to get to a location that seems to be in this sort of discrete location that can only be achieved by doing such. However, they have in joining them a character named JD. They have a specific rule about not touching stuff. He proceeds to chisel stuff, and then that causes a bit of infighting, and for them to kick him out. They are temporarily gaunt out from the cops, and what proceeds next is JD joining the competition. However, after putting their video on the webs, they get joined by a taller, buff guy named, I believe his name like Frank or something or whatever, but point being is that he joins them essentially to go inside this area that they were sort of, I don't know if they were necessarily debating on going in, but I digress in that they go through a tunnel filled with mice burrowing through. We have them encroaching upon this hotel of sorts, which seems, at least initially, as abandoned as one might think. We have Vern taking some pics along the way, and we have yelling, which causes the bulbs on the roof to fall. Diana ignores a call and hears some suspicious noises in the distance and goes off on her own. And we even see this white hand grapple her, I think, at this juncture early on in the movie. Meanwhile, we cut to Cora, who's talking to said new guy about the rest of the crew, so this is where we learn about what they do, in case that wasn't obvious enough. Vern, however, sees some scratches on the walls and hears the same noise, and comes to the conclusion that this place has got some creepy mumbo-jumbo going on. However, the group, when they rekindle or regroup, they are short one Diana, and thus they don't feel inclined to just leave her there. They do some researching and find a paper about how apparently, again, this place was abandoned. However, despite being abandoned, Rick gets hit by a bear trap. They hear her phone go off and proceed to move to that location. But unfortunately, it is shortly after that where JD and his crew, known as the Scavengers, attack. They hold the group at gunpoint, and this is probably the worst part of the movie. As one of the scavengers, I don't recall which one, pushes Rick off of the balcony. He will survive this, somehow. However, later on in the movie, the new guy will also push himself off of the balcony to save somebody else, but he will die. So I don't understand, because it looked like Rick fell even further, and gravity is a thing. But anyway, I digress. They head down in search of Lou, in search of Rick, and Cora goes even further beyond to try to help him. But, as more of these tall, white, lanky figurines make their presence known, the killers, or the scavengers, as I will continue to call them, use their night vision. They brought it with them. They see JD get suspended in the air, and they waste a lot of their shots at this juncture of the movie. As I mentioned, Rick is somehow alive, hiding with Cora, as we now get the strongest glimpse of the white creature, the lanky, one might call it a Wendigo, but I'm not entirely sure if that's what they were going for here, but I digress. So meanwhile, while they run toward the elevator, we cut back to the rest of the scavengers finding a great deal of money. However, they had gotten split off from one another, and one of them were running off because they were like, fuck this shit, I'm out. But he gets fucked by a nearly invisible wire by running through it. The other is killed by one of the white beasts. I don't know if it's a Wendigo or not, but it's close enough that I feel like I should just call them Wendigos. At any rate, Vern gets to Cora via using the cable lift, and Frank, the new guy, his name actually was Frank. I actually just I misremembered, and then it was in my notes later on. Anyway, he finds his dead wife. That's the whole reason he was even here. Meanwhile, we see that Diana almost got married to one of the creatures. I don't know what that whole bit was about, but I digress in saying that she dejected it far deep into the territory of wedding into a creature, which, as I mentioned, Frank gores that very said creature when they are sort of on the upper arterial, and that causes Frank to die, and that allows for the four main characters that we started off with being the ones that leave with money included, by the way. They somehow found the money. And they drive off into the deep horizons for a new tomorrow. And that was the movie Do Not Enter. I think with a few more revisements in the script in terms of, like, how did Rick survive that fall, and maybe not doing this bizarre wedding thing that seems a bit baffling. Other than these things, I do think that this movie actually does have quite a number of potential. It kind of has a Until Dawn, again, very Wendigo approach. And, Until Dawn wasn't a great movie by any means, but, that had an extremely humorous scene on top of all of everything else, but I digress in saying that this movie was fine-ish. I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10. or maybe like a 5 out of 10. The character writing isn't particularly too strong. We don't learn too much outside of like what their sort of generic roles are. Like, who are these characters actually? What kind of, purpose do they have outside of their assigned roles? And it doesn't seem like the movie seems too interested in feeding character writing and in depth, unfortunately. So that is one of the bigger hang-ups of most horror movies in general. And it seems to plague this movie just as well. Of course, the scavengers are significantly worse in that regard, as they are just literally bodies thrown in so that there are deaths, so that our lead characters can survive. So that makes it way more recognizable that is the case. And with character writing, I feel like you could have made that a bit more make the back and forth a bit more earned in terms of like regarding this secondary group as like competition, but not necessarily threatening to our initial group. I think would have been a much more interesting way of going about making them not only characters, but removing the bit where Rick, quote unquote, dies. You can remove that entire bit and just shift it into something else entirely. Because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as it is. So these are just some of the puzzle pieces you have to solve for in terms of writing, is like, how do you have a pretty decent roster of quote-unquote characters, I should say, in quotes, because, they're very flat. And then, how do you not only make them characters relatively quickly, that is a trick that definitely comes from very strong writing, is, if characters have like little bips and bops that they do, like, for just as an example, Cora, like when she's talking about her group, like that is the extent of their characters, like really. Vern is just the guy who takes the pictures. We don't really know who he is. She is the athletic one, Cora herself. She can do parkour. But I don't know what makes her distinct other than she kind of vaguely likes Vern, maybe? I don't know. Diana is the main streamer, so it is a bit bizarre that we do cut away from her sort of pretty quickly. Again, the whole wedding thing, I feel like that could also be repackaged in something that is a bit more substantive in terms of like either character work or telling us something about Diana other than she's like the leader and streamer character. What type of streamer is she? She seems like a very generic streamer character. Like, she doesn't seem like a streamer that would be very popular. Mayhaps. But that doesn't even come across in the writing. That's the problem. Or sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Like, for example, in the beginning, they're relatively smaller. That's why the scavengers are beating them. So it would be, it would really heighten it when, that sort of inexperience is pushed into the character of Diana. Maybe she doesn't know all of the streaming terminology, things like that. Maybe one of the, again, with them being competitors rather than just a group that hates each other completely, maybe one of the scavengers is like, we deserve better, proper competition, so at least let me teach you this, X, Y, and Z, right? something to, like, help give the character an arc through her story rather than, again, just being flat. Again, these are things you can consider doing. I guess in a sense, Frank has technically the most going on. He's like in search of his wife and then finds out her fate. But even then, he needs a little bit more. I feel like even despite that. But I digress. So that is, again, like a 5 or 6 out of 10 in terms of where this is. Needs a little bit of a tighter script, and then, you can improve from there. So that is my review for Do Not Enter, and if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. And when you're headed to my petition about small YouTubers, check it to my PayPal, but you can help support me and my channel directly, and there to my Discord server. You join Collab, Shield, all that cool stuff, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye.